All right. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Michael Luna, Director of Sales at Todata Analytics. Today's session is going to be a little bit different from our previous webinars. Instead of focusing on a specific use case, we're going to take a step back and share the story behind the company, how it was started, how it has evolved, and where we are heading next. I'm joined today by Todata's founder and president, Ben Titus. Ben, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, we are too. This session is designed to be conversational, peer-led discussion. We're going to talk through the journey of building Todata, the lessons learned along the way, and how organizations today are using data to make better decisions. As always, this is not a sales pitch, just a practical conversation around real-world experience and insights. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to drop them into the Q&A tab. We'll leave time at the end of this to address any of those questions. And just a quick note, this session is being recorded, so you'll receive a copy of that recording afterwards. So this session today is really designed for any business owners out there, regardless of the industry, or anybody in an executive level type leadership that is consistently looking at the data analytics of their company and the performance of the company, which obviously includes people in operations roles and obviously finance leaders. Anybody else that is on a data analytics team that is responsible for creating some of those business intelligence and data analytic reports, if that is what you do for your company, then you're in the right place. So what we're really going to get out of is talking about the fragmented systems that all businesses work with, right? Most businesses are working with multiple systems, not just a single platform. That could be their main operating system plus their finance, or plus your HR, so on and so forth. So we're gonna discuss the issues related to those systems and the problems that they cause, right, from a leadership standpoint, and really getting a clear picture, real time, into that business and how you're operating. So Ben Titus is our president and founder. He founded the company back in 2016. Prior to that, he was in banking and finance for a number of years, working with clients across all types of different industries. And today, Todata works with a multitude of companies, from construction to logistics, clinical research, accounting firms, restaurants, and many more. So Ben, let's hop right into it, and let's just start. We're going to do this in phases. So let's just start from the beginning. What originally inspired you to start Todata?
Sure. So, well, as you described, I experienced the challenges of trying to find answers to really strategic questions when I worked at the bank. And primarily, it began with trying to understand who the bank's best customers were. And as somebody that worked in the corporate banking arena, we would introduce a wide range of different banking services to every customer, from trust services to capital markets and commercial lending. And like many organizations, our bank at the time was, very decentralized in a way that data was collected by those business units and the profitability really managed by a product or a service arm of the bank. And so the roles that I had served in the bank really I was charged with trying to find ways to grow those relationships, manage those relationships, and find ways to introduce those clients to new services within the bank, and really just the consistent challenge to determine how profitable a relationship was with the disparate data that lived across various systems within the bank led to a just ongoing challenge of trying to determine really who were the most valuable and maybe even the more problematic clients of the bank using that information, rather than just relying on those business leaders or division leaders to tell us who they felt were the most important clients. And beyond that, just having a general curiosity about data and how you could tell a story with a large data set after doing some analysis is really what led to my venture off to create a new company that would focus on trying to provide this service to other organizations.
What was the initial client or problem that you guys started with to kind of get things rolling?
Yeah, I think one of the first engagements that we took on when we started the company was a healthcare consortium. So it was a wide range of different healthcare organizations trying to work together without acquiring one another. So keeping at arm's length ownership lines, but at the same time collaborating as a larger alliance to find ways to be more efficient, how to potentially contract with suppliers in a more collaborative way that would save folks money. And it was funny, I can vividly remember sitting around a conference table with, CFOs and C-suite individuals from these 5 or 6 health systems, and everyone had a printed out spreadsheet of, anywhere between 50 and 75 pages deep. And, it was how much they spent on everything from bed sheets and linens to medical surgical supplies, and who they would, typically buy those supplies from. And their objective was really simple. It was, is there some commonality here among who we're doing business with? And, where are the consistencies across these organizations that we've formed this alliance under, where we can potentially leverage that scale and, get a better price or align ourselves with a better maybe purchasing agreement. And so that's really where we began. Again, it's kind of crazy to think about now, but, collecting Excel files from each of these organizations and trying to create a single source of truth was the very beginning of the concept around how to pull that together into a single data model and give everyone the same visibility, regardless from which organization they were looking at it from.
Very cool. What would you say, just from a comparison standpoint, what did the very early versions of the Two Data platform, how did that compare with today?
Yeah, it's just been light years. It seems like a different lifetime at this point because of how fast technology has advanced, not just in the last 36 months, but prior to that, with really the introduction of more infrastructure as a service, meaning the ability to, use cloud-based services and servers that would have, previously taken a huge capital investment on our end to host servers and then, ultimately ingest client data, organize it into a data model. That the proliferation of infrastructure as a service through cloud providers really made it possible. But those early days really were, again, like a big Excel document with pivot tables, with really native, really simple visualizations that told a story was what that product looked like. But it wasn't very long following that initial engagement where we were introduced to Microsoft Power BI platform. Tableau came right about the same time, making these visualization tools more accessible to the analyst level developer that could then shape those CSV level data files into something that could be more useful on a day-to-day basis for decision makers. And so we quickly adopted those tools as a way to, bring data together and visualize day-to-day operational data as a story. Those were the earliest versions of what we were doing. Yeah.
This is just another question that kind of popped to my head. But when you started the company, how many people? Was it just you at the time, or did you have some help?
Yeah, I mean, it was just me and a partner that, had some expertise in working with professional services and CPA firms. So, by way of really accident, we ended up engaging with a number of CPA firms that had a common thread. And the thread was everyone we talked to described a frustration around the reporting they would get out of their software as a service provider or practice management system. And so it was at that point, I think we really started to think how we might be able to leverage a process or a product that simply made that data more accessible and more usable for the client. That as we went further and further down that conversation, found there's really 3 or 4 primary providers of that type of practice management software across thousands of different CPA firms. And so if we could perfect the way that we would extract that data, transform it, and then represent it in a way that could be shared among the team, then maybe we had something that folks would adopt as a day-to-day tool.
Oh, that's great. That's great perspective. I think it's helpful. I think a lot of people on today's call are current clients, so I think they're really curious to see, how did this come about, and so that's great. Moving on here, as you were building this company, what were some of the biggest challenges early on?
A lot of these tools. Yeah. Geez, it's crazy. Looking back, some of those biggest challenges early on. Well, first, I was a banker by trade, so not being an engineer and being really self-taught for the last more than a decade now, the learning curve is extraordinarily steep in terms of how to navigate a lot of these data sources, extracting the data, creating a data pipeline, normalizing data coming from multiple data sources into something that allows those data sources to make sense when you're looking at it from a single point of view. And so I would say, the lessons there is making sure that, we had the right folks with the technical expertise to help speed that process along. And then also, again, I think what we've learned in more recent years is that, every user wants to see the information slightly differently. And there's no wrong or right reason for that. It's just simply, how it makes the most sense to the user. And, using those early tools where they stood on their own, a Microsoft Power BI report, many of our clients will tell us of, that they have an analyst team, they have Power BI that they share reporting across the organization. And while it delivers value, it just ends up being really another workload for a team internally that has to consistently either maintain those reports or create new reports. Because again, the users are wanting something slightly different, or they want to see a visual a different way, or they, potentially have, they have requests that kind of come out of left field, so to speak. And for us, it became pretty clear early on that we would need to find a way to make that solution more flexible. So here we are today, really addressing that. Did I lose you?
Awesome. I did for I pushed the button there for a second, so I apologize about that.
Yeah,
what when you started working with clients, what did you notice that surprised you the most, I guess? Even, I guess, working across different industries, there's probably a common problem amongst different businesses.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's just the proliferation of software as a service. Like, as infrastructure as a service became more accessible, not just to us, but to literally everybody in the technology space, you saw very niche applications come to market for payroll, for ERP providers, CRMs, every aspect of the operational functions of really any business ended up with 10, 15 different applications that were, again, maybe best in class, and to no fault of the clients that we were working with. They wanted the best tool available because there were frustrations around how they were processing payroll. So they went with ADP, or they went with really any number of these providers. And again, the end result ended up being that, it just became a really difficult challenge to see what was going on, from the people to, the day-to-day operations to the finance reporting that was happening on even a bi-monthly basis, because there would be a huge effort to pull that data down from each one of those applications and make sense of it in a way that executive leadership could use that information to make strategic decisions. And so it was a bit surprising to see how quickly that accelerated over the last 10 years. And today, again, we're seeing really much of the same with AI, where every one of those software providers is introducing some AI component. And I think clients are like wondering, how do we leverage it? Should we leverage it? Is it safe to use? So it's just, again, a kind of another moment in time of just how fast this technology just in general is changing.
Yeah, I think it always is, makes you laugh when you see, a particular business using maybe two different types of core systems, right? It's the same system. It's just they like visuals in one system or features in one system better than others. So working with different businesses, and it's funny how some people operate, right? So having all of these different systems, it's tough to get your arms around what is going on with the business on a day-to-day. So that's great. What are some lessons that shaped the company and helped it evolve?
Yeah, and I think certainly the engagement that we had with Meridian Clinical Research, and now previously the owner of that company is now my current partner, Nikki Osborne, and Nikki working with her leadership team to solve that exact challenge, where simply a fast-growing organization that had anywhere from 10 to 15 different applications supporting all of those various functions, and really figuring out a way to bring that into a single source of truth that organization could then make quick, fast decisions about how they were managing research trials, how they were hiring people. Were they hiring people at a rate that would meet their demand? Were they allocating resources across 35 different site locations in a way that was most efficient? So many of those questions were just very difficult to answer, operating as really individual silos or business applications. And so, learning how much that helped their organization, I think gave us direction and ultimately has shaped us into what we are today and where we're going.
Oh, that's great. Let's keep it moving here. How has Todata changed from those earlier days to today, whether it's personnel, technology, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think the primary change for our business model was to work more as a consultancy and provide our professional services as an hourly rate, something that, I would maybe have described at the time as an extension of our clients' analyst team. So they could ask us to develop something very custom, very specific to their business. And again, I mean, that might involve like literally hundreds of hours of development time. And again, through iteration and requests and changes, that's how the business would run, is ultimately, making changes to work that we had already done at the direction of the user. And it just didn't feel scalable, and it didn't feel sustainable, honestly. I mean, how many developers and engineers can you really, effectively manage across a number of clients that are constantly needing something slightly different? And so, I think that realization is really what has led us to today, where we've developed a more turnkey solution for specific industry niches, while developing a solution that will allow each individual user to see the visuals or the table or the special report that they'd like to see themselves on demand, rather than having to come back to the organization and our team and say, hey, what's the developmental effort to, create this view or change this visual into a time series visual versus a pie chart. And so that I would say is probably the biggest change in our business model over the last 3 years, for sure.
Yeah, going from a billable hour type of model to a more of a SaaS type product. Obviously, it's a little bit different than your typical SaaS product. But when did you realize you could scale this across multiple industries? I know you touched on Meridian a little bit. The CPAs. At what point over the last 10, 11 years did you realize we could take this to other businesses?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think coming up with can we answer 95% of the questions for a particular business owner in a specific industry? It's just, if we could accurately and confidently say yes, because we could anticipate what applications they were using, we would know how to connect with those applications in a way that would make the engineering effort affordable and just take that burden off the business owners themselves that, maybe don't have engineers on staff. And if they do have engineers on staff, they likely have them doing more specific work to the core business versus, coming up with an analytics platform. So, taking that engineering burden off of the shoulders in a way that off the shoulders of the client in a way that then could feel more like, hey, this is worth having Todata do this engineering for us, and they're giving us out of the box, answers to 90%, 95% of the questions that we know we have on a day-to-day basis. And if there's an additional way to answer that 5% beyond that maybe are very specific and unique to our organization, then I think we have something that's scalable. So that's what's led us to today.
You touched on some different industries and doing some custom builds that led you to essentially creating products like SiteGrades and LawFirmGrades. I guess at what point did you go from saying, hey, we could do this across an entire industry?
I think really early on, to be honest. I think just, you have a conversation with a managing partner at a CPA firm, and they would describe the same challenges that the previous managing partner that you visited with described. And, the only variance was, is this application versus the other application, but they're producing the same frustration. So if we can solve one, we can solve the other. And again, I mean, I think that most industries are faced with a similar set of options when it comes to, the core software applications they use to run their business, and all of those present their own unique challenges. And to be fair, I think it became quite clear that most of the applications that exist today weren't originally intended to give access to the underlying data tables. It was really all about the front end and what data you could track and collect on the as your users used it to, I don't know, track time or track expenses. And very little thought, I think, was given to the back end of those applications on how to leverage all of that metadata that's collected through the course of using the application. And that's only been really in the last, I'd say, 5 years, where it's now an expectation for folks that are signing contracts. And we give this advice and recommendation to our clients all the time that are looking at switching from one application to the next, is making sure that they ask for API access. They ask for, direct database connectivity, so that data that is their data that they own, that they collected by using the application, that it's accessible to the clients. And so I think that's been a real change in the industry over the last 5 years.
This kind of presents another question here. What was that lift like when you started working with these other platforms, right? Practice management software, clinical trial software. What was it like when you initially started connecting those systems and building out those data feeds? What was that lift like for you guys?
It's difficult. It's hard. Right out of the gate, it's very difficult to navigate. There's not a lot of documentation at times, so there's no clear path of, there might be literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different tables that live behind any application. And so knowing which tables really contain the data points that you're after, if that's not well documented by the software provider, it can be extraordinarily frustrating for anyone trying to leverage that information. So yeah, the level of difficulty, I think, right out of the gate was, again, like a brick wall in terms of the learning curve. But you make incremental progress. You learn from the previous engagement something that you can apply forward, and eventually, you come to a place where, regardless if it's a new application or something we've worked with previously, we have a good idea of where to start that process to make it a little more smooth.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Now, what do most organizations get wrong with their reporting and analytics when they try to do it internally? Or what are some of maybe the hurdles that they have to overcome, or some common issues that you see across industries, businesses? What are some of those reporting and analytic difficulties?
Yeah, I think I think one of the biggest challenges that sometimes goes overlooked is how are you going to share the information? So maybe, and we work with a lot of teams that have really talented analysts on staff, and the analysts, they understand the ELT process, the extract, load, transform process of getting the data into a place that can be visualized. But, again, having a useful, whether it's a Power BI report or even a really efficient pivot table that lives on top of a vast Excel document, is only useful when it's working. And so maintaining, a data pipeline from these data sources can be a real challenge from an engineering perspective. So, the engineering and the analyst are really two different functions that are both necessary to provide us a stable analytics platform to any organization, in my opinion. So I think, you might have one and not the other, and you ask that role to do both steps of the process. And so that can be a challenge. And then, like I was saying, sharing it once you have a view or a report or a dashboard even that is useful, how do you share that amongst, everybody in the organization and permission it based off of what they should and shouldn't see? That can be a real challenge, and something that, just because the effort to get it to the place where it was usable was so significant that, it's to no one's fault, but it's one of those last things that you kind of like, oh, geez, okay, so how do we distribute this in a secure way that, doesn't risk this information getting out? And at the same time, how do we deliver it in a way that's reliable so that when users get used to using something on a day-to-day basis, that when they go back to use it in week 2, that it's not, old data or give them a login error or something like that. So just the delivery of the effort that you've put together can be a real challenge for folks, I think.
Yeah. What is, and this is just another question that popped in my head, but from a cost standpoint, I know a lot of companies we talk to, they're trying to decide, do we build it or do we buy it, right? And can you just kind of talk a little bit about what those costs look like for any company really out there that may be using another business intelligence platform that's trying to do it themselves?
Again, I think everyone's costs are unique to their organization. I mean, I always think about people cost. So, I was describing really two aspects of, maintaining and delivering an analytics platform is the engineering and the analyst. The analyst generally has just that. They have analysis skills. They understand the context of the business's operations. And the engineering is much more focused on the actual technical aspects of these applications and may not have that business knowledge or business context. And so, asking one or the other to do really that full scope of work can be a real challenge. And then let's say, if you have both resources on staff, so now, it becomes a little bit more expensive from a people perspective in terms of, having a team of folks internally that can consistently pay attention to the analytics platform aside from their day-to-day duties. But from the resources that are used, the resources that are available, whether it's AWS or Microsoft Azure or really any cloud services provider, in terms of those resources can get expensive when you're doing a lot of guesswork on what you should use, and maybe what you tried this and then you're trying something else, and those resources can sometimes balloon. Really, a cloud engineer today is somebody that is really valuable to have, and sometimes really hard to find in terms of adding to the team, because there's so much available from these cloud service providers in terms of resources, everything from monitoring your applications to protecting it from outside attacks to spinning up various databases or data warehouses. I mean, it just goes on and on. You can spin up any of these resources from a cloud services provider, but knowing what you're doing and knowing what it will cost you as you start leveraging those resources can be somewhat of a black box if you're not experienced. So, there's the resources and then there's the people. And so having, visibility across that whole scope is something that is definitely necessary when you're building your own solution in-house. And some folks just are like, that's not our core business. And if there's an opportunity to to have you guys do it, then great. Then it might be a really good fit.
And you kind of touched on this, allowing different individuals to see, different visuals, or just having access. A lot of those platforms, they charge per seat, right? So if you want to view it, you probably, you got to pay for a seat.
Yeah, and that can be a business decision too by a lot of these providers. I think that model is probably starting to feel a little bit, well, in my opinion, aged. From our perspective, the more folks that have access to the solution, the better the organization is going to operate, because you're giving the information to people that need the information to make more informed decisions. And if that's 3 or 4 people and not 40, you might be limiting yourself. But if you're limiting yourself because the seats are $250 each, like per month, it's kind of a self-defeating business model. So for us, we tend to think like, it's one fee, and you give it to as many people as you can, to help make better decisions.
Yeah, no. You kind of touched on this, but what are some of the changes that you see with our clients once they have access to a real-time source of truth?
It's probably one of the most rewarding things that I can say from our business is that, when we hear from our clients stories that, save them a tremendous amount of time, I think that's usually the first piece of feedback that we'll get, is just, wow, we used to do this and it would take us, a week to pull that together. And now, at a glance, we can pull that down and get answers to that question. So it's certainly satisfying and rewarding for us to hear those stories about the amount of time savings. And then I would say that, when we hear examples of insights gained that weren't previously known, and I think, as we roll out, feature enhancements and our clients gain access to Todd, our AI analyst, we'll see more and more of that. But it's just, again, can you put the most knowledgeable person in the room or in your company in front of the data all the time, not just when they're in the room? Yeah. And that's our goal, is to be able to give you the flexibility to leverage that business knowledge that the organization has and make it available to any user that has questions about the day-to-day operations of the business.
Well, that's super helpful context, and I think it highlights something that we hear often, and it's that organizations don't have a data problem; they have a visibility problem, right? Well, let me take a couple minutes here to connect the dots, right? Really, what Todata does is exactly what this slide says. We make sense of the mess, right? We can connect anything from an operations system, finance platform, human resources, your CRM, practice management, depending on obviously the industry. We can, as long as there's a data feed available and a path for us to gain access to that data, that's what we do. We pull it all into the Todata platform, and then we have an entire team of engineers that will organize it and make it so that it's useful for you, right? And it's near real time. This slide really just kind of highlights, the difference between trying to do this in-house, right? And what some of the things you will encounter. Ben had mentioned, when things break, right? If you're maintaining this in-house, you have to fix it on your own, right? That data feed and these platforms, their API feeds sometimes aren't the best, but they break, right? They change the data within their tables, and that causes a break in that API feed. So now you will have to go or your engineers or people in-house are going to have to go and try to reconnect that. We fully manage it. We build the platform for you. We extract all the data, normalize it, like Ben had mentioned, and we essentially just give you a platform that you can come in each and every day, and that works, right? That's really what we tell our clients is we want you to be able to just log in, and the system works for you. These are just a few of the various grades platforms that we have built out. The CPAGrades, Ben had mentioned that. SiteGrades, that's for clinical research, and then LawFirmGrades for any law firms. A lot of these, industries, they're billing, they're billing for their time. Or if you're obviously in clinical research, you have multiple sites. You have a lot of moving parts there, so trying to keep your arms around, those trials that are ongoing. We do have a full house, in-house team of engineers at our headquarters in Omaha, Nebraska. So everybody on our team is internal. The last thing I'll mention is our little guy, Todd. Ben kind of touched on him a little bit here, but Todd is your analyst, right? And we train him on the particular industry that you're in. So you can essentially talk to him in natural language, just like you can any other AI type tool, and just ask him questions related to your data. And it's fully secure. So it's, the data is fenced in. We do not train models off of your data. We do not share it outside of your organization. We have single sign-on access to get into the platform, and only you and your team are able to view your data. So you can't ask them to pick the Sweet 16 winners because he just doesn't know. Other than what we train them on. Ben, just to kind of wrap things up here, let's talk a little bit about the future vision of the company. Where do you see data analytics heading over the next few years?
Yeah, this is crazy. This is crazy times right now. We are using all kinds of AI tools in our development. So it just helps us move so much faster. What was taking engineers 2 or 3 weeks now takes 2 or 3 hours. I'm sure everyone on the call has heard these things in the news. It's very real. And I will say, how does it influence analytics in the future? If I look at our roadmap today, we will at the end of this month be releasing our latest version of the Todata app to clients with Todd. And Todd is doing things that I just didn't even think was possible even a year ago. So I guess the future is what our clients can imagine in terms of what it is that they are looking for in enhancements and ways that they can, improve their day-to-day workflows, but, ask complex questions we view it as 2 different types of queries. The user is going to ask a data question, which is, how many billable hours did we have in, March of last year, this week, compared to the current week? And Todd says, here's the answer to that. Oh, and then you follow up, well, is that specific to a particular employee or an area of the firm? Or, literally drilling down to try to find root cause. To do that in a dashboard would be painful. And so things like that I'm seeing that are just transformative in terms of how I think folks are going to, think of analytics, not just now, but going forward. And then there are business questions. So a business question versus a data question is how many clients should we anticipate bringing on in the next 3 months based off of our current marketing efforts? And so, looking at historical data in terms of how much time's been logged, how much money has been spent on various subcategories of marketing efforts. So sales, networking, advertising, whatever it might be, and looking at historical trends of how that translated to new client acquisition over a 3-month period, and then comparing that to existing spend and time spent or recorded in those various areas to determine a potential forecast of pipeline. Those are like really multi-query strategic questions that are like, I think, a reality today. So it will be really interesting to see how far it goes from just a strict, like, what is the most expert analyst you can imagine that knows about your business, and can you ask it questions about what you should do next? Again, it's hard to say. And if you're asking like how does AI play a role in this, I mean, it plays a key role in all of it. Again, our ability to develop a solution quickly and test it quickly relies heavily on having access to these AI tools. And it's all very exciting. I do think that I envision, users really using these tools on a day-to-day basis to make their companies more profitable, more efficient, understanding what is truly driving the value of their organization without, using gut feel or, just purely relying on instincts is really what is most exciting.
Well, I think you kind of answered those last few questions, but I guess I will ask you what most excites you about the future of Todata? What are maybe one or two things that that you could add to that?
Yeah, I mean, what's most exciting today is, I think, again, the platform that we are building and giving to our clients that really fills a necessary gap in helping them manage their business, and seeing that grow. So, the capabilities of that platform becoming more and more day to day in terms of its impact for our clients is really most exciting. And ultimately, scale with the more clients that we work with, the more insight that we gain in terms of specific industries, and having visibility into patterns and being able to then anticipate potential opportunities for our clients by way of having that much data, I think, is also really exciting.
Awesome. Well, we're running short on time here, but we do have a couple questions that we can take. Ben, I'll let you take this one, and then I can take the next. How does Todata differ from traditional business intelligence tools that are out there?
Well, I think the primary difference is that we're a managed service. So, I mean, again, thinking self-service or something that you have to maintain yourself, we're simply a managed service provider. So we connect with your data sources, and we build those data pipelines, and we give you a platform to leverage the intelligence that's built from that data model. And your expectation as a user should be that it just works, that it's there when you need it, versus, again, having to do it yourself. I would say that's the most significant difference.
Nope, that's a great answer. How quickly can teams start seeing or have access to a dashboard like this? What is the onboarding process? How long does that typically take? Do you want to go? You want to answer that one, Ben?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is it generally depends on really how many deployments we have going at one time. And it might depend on, again, the industry. So, if it's something that's, within one of these specific verticals where we've developed a turnkey solution, really the speed at which you'll gain that insights could be just a couple of weeks. Whereas, if it's something relatively new for us, we've done some work with franchise owners, and we've done some work for, we mentioned logistic companies where we were totally unfamiliar with their data sources. And so that might take a touch longer. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I think what's just so exciting and promising is that having these AI tools available to us just really accelerates that data connectivity path, where that would have been something that could have taken months in the past is now only taking weeks or less. So generally, I mean, the general answer is like, if you're a CPA firm today that wants to connect its practice management data to our application and have Todd answering really fascinating questions, I mean, it can be up and running as fast as 48 hours. If you're a clinical research site with 4 or 5 different software applications that you want to bring into a single source of truth, it could be, depending on how many deployments we have going, could be 2 or 3 weeks.
All right. Well, thank you, Ben, for that. Well, that's a wrap on today's session. Ben, thank you again for your perspective.
It was fun. Thanks everyone for jumping in. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Good to see some familiar names on. So.
Yeah, thank you all. We really appreciate your time. If anybody on here that is not currently working with us, if anything from today's discussion raised questions about your own data or visibility, we'd be happy to continue the conversation. You can contact me directly by dialing the phone number listed on the screen. You can shoot me an email, or you can also book a demo directly on our website, www.todata.com. As mentioned, this is part of a monthly webinar series, and we will be having our next webinar, which is scheduled for April 21st. So we hope that you can be there. Thank you all again, and hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.